Secret Hitler, a novel by Secret Himmler. Prologue. A black woman in fishnet stockings and a short skirt stood on the street corner of a run-down urban neighborhood. The paint was fading from the strip mall behind her, despite the colorful signs on the windows of the nail salon and smoke shop. The woman watched cars pass by, ignoring her, and whistled at a group of men walking past her across the street. The men pointed and gawked, and some of them even made hooting and hollering noises, but they didn't cross the street for her. A few minutes passed until she noticed a black man who'd just come out of the smoke shop looking her over as he stood next to his car. He was wearing fancy sneakers and gold chains with name-brand clothes that had once been nice but weren't being cared for properly. She decided to take a chance and walked across the small parking lot towards him. "Hey baby, you got fitty?" "Depends on what you got, girl." "You want to see what I got? Meet me in back." She motioned for him to follow as she walked towards the end of the building, shaking her ass with each step in her heels and glancing back to make sure he was following. The lane behind the strip mall was littered with trash and poorly lit. A dumpster at the end of the lane mostly blocked the view from the road, but it was possible someone could watch from the cheap Section 8 apartment building across the alley behind the strip mall. The man licked his lips as the woman leaned up against the wall a little ways past the dumpster. "Show me the money, you can see everything." She pushed her tits out a little, trying to be enticing. Her dark skin made her difficult to see clearly in the dark alley, but the shape of her body was enough for the man. He pulled a wad of 10s and 20s out of his pocket, flashed it at her long enough for her eyes to go wide in surprise, then put it back in the pocket of his sagging jeans. "Let's see how much you can handle, baby." He put his hands on her chest, feeling her up before pulling her shirt up. Her hands went to his waist, and she tried to casually move her hand towards the pocket with the money without making it obvious as he touched her, but he noticed what she was doing and grabbed her hand before she could slip it in. "Bitch, what you doing?" "Nothing, baby." She tried to sound innocent, but he smacked her across the face with his other hand. "Bitch, you trying to rob me?" "No, baby, it ain't like that," she pleaded, hardly bothered by the slap as long as she made her money and didn't get ripped off. "What you want to do with me?" "Shut your damn mouth unless you wrapping it around this dick," he replied, and rather than get offended, she dropped to her knees. The noise she made muffled the sound of light footsteps coming around the dumpster. She was too focused on the man in front of her, and he was too focused on talking down to her and keeping control over her to notice the person creeping up behind him until it was too late. The knife plunged into his side, ripping its way into his kidney and sending him into shock. "Nigga, you stabbed me!" the man shouted as he looked down at the hole in his side as blood spurted out, but he was too shocked to do anything but clutch the wound as the knife ripped through his neck, slitting his throat. He dropped to the ground, and the woman knelt there, looking up at his attacker with terror on her face for a moment, desperately trying to figure out what to say to keep from being murdered as well. "You saved me," she blurted out. "This nigga robbed me, and he was finna rape me. You can have the money. Here!" She snatched the wad of bills out of the dying man's back pocket and practically threw it at the knife-wielding attacker, but for nothing. A moment later, the knife plunged into her neck, and she shared the same fate. Two white men and a white woman in business suits walked into the conference room of the police station. Detective Richard Baker was a middle-aged man with short dark hair and a mustache, with an average height and build. Detective William Hill was in his early 30s, a little taller and more muscular, and clean-shaven with about an inch of sandy blonde hair. Sandra Rivers was almost as tall as Richard, with light brown hair tied back in a ponytail and light, natural-looking makeup on. The three of them took their seats as their boss handed each of them a folder. "There's been another murder. 2 victims this time. The man is Dontrell Brown. He's got a prior conviction for drug dealing and a few arrests for other things, but none of the other charges stuck. He's got assault, robbery, and rape carved into his chest. He does have an assault conviction, and he was arrested for robbery twice, but has not been convicted of robbery or of rape. The woman is Letitia Tibbs. She got whore and thief carved into her chest, and her phone records confirm that she was a prostitute and had stolen from customers, though she's never been arrested or charged." The 3 detectives looked over the files and pictures as their boss explained the situation. "It definitely fits the pattern," Richard said. "Any chance this could just be a gang killing or one of their victims getting revenge using the serial killers as a cover?" Neither of them has any gang ties we're aware of, their boss replied, but we did find bags of coke, crack, and meth in the man's apartment. Looked like he was dealing. What about the secret Hitler connection? Sandra asked. Usually when we see one of these killings, more of their propaganda goes up. There were secret Hitler flyers in every driveway in my neighborhood this morning, William replied. My Ring camera turned off for a few hours last night. Every neighbor I checked with had the same issue. William pulled a clear Ziploc bag out of his pocket. Inside was a folded-up flyer and 2 pennies. I dropped a few of them off at the lab when I came in and kept this one to look over. William opened the bag and pulled the flyer out, unfolded it, and set it on the table for everyone to look at. At the top of the flyer were the words Secret Hitler in all caps. Below that was a graph with 2 lines, one labeled Productivity and the other labeled Worker Pay, showing that workers hadn't gotten a real raise since the early 70s, despite a significant increase in productivity since then. Below that was more text with a few faces that had been turned blue, claiming that the Federal Reserve was taken over by Jews in 1970 and that the Jews have stolen trillions of dollars from American workers, making them many times more likely to be billionaires than any other race. I think I've seen that graph before, Richard said. He pulled out his phone and started searching for it. Not sure how accurate the rest of it is. He soon found a similar-looking graph and showed it to the others. Seems about right, Sandra said. Doesn't mean the Jews are behind it, though. They're most likely taking real issues and twisting them to fit their narrative, their boss replied. Their previous propaganda campaigns have done the same, taking real problems and finding a way to blame them on Jews. Even if their propaganda was true, it wouldn't explain why they're killing black people. Richard asked, have they done any propaganda targeting black people? Their boss answered, not that I've seen. Not accusing them of anything, no, William added. They did put up some flyers near 40th and MLK a few weeks back telling black people that Jews were responsible for the slave trade and quoting some Israeli officials saying racist things about black people. Really? Richard looked amused. I must have missed that one. It was one of the first incidents a couple months ago before you got put on the case, Sandra explained. Same night Dee's Chains and his crew got killed. Richard asked, that rapper who killed his wife? That's the one, Sandra nodded. Their propaganda might have gone over better if they hadn't killed a bunch of black people that night. We don't know for sure yet that the people responsible for the propaganda are also responsible for the murders, William countered. And we did solve his wife's murder because of it. Don't tell me you're sympathizing with Secret Hitler, Richard said, half joking. William replied, no, just trying not to assume more than we can prove. You have a point, though, Richard pondered. It is odd that the propaganda all seems targeted at Jews, while the murders are all targeting blacks. If they hate Jews so much, why aren't there any Jewish murder victims? If they hate blacks enough to kill them, why doesn't any of their propaganda explain why? And why does every black victim have their crimes carved into their body? Sandra asked. We can confirm that almost all the victims actually committed the crimes the killer accused them of. Not that that excuses anything, but they're not just killing black people indiscriminately. The riots after Dee's Chains got killed were pretty indiscriminate, Richard said. Maybe that was their goal, turn the community against itself. He picked up the flyer and looked it over again. Maybe now they're trying to cause a general strike over people's pay. Sandra put her hand on the flyer, scanning the back. What's this part? Zev Schultz planned to steal millions from the city? Richard turned the flyer over and set it back down so all 4 of them could read it. The message on the back was less colorful, but contained a couple paragraphs of text accusing local bank owner Zev Schultz of a scheme to siphon millions of dollars from projects proposed by City Councilwoman Agnes Levin. Sandra commented, no evidence, of course. William asked, Levin, wasn't she the one that pushed for all the body cams and dash cams a while back? That's the one, their boss confirmed. Good for her. That camera saved my ass when that bastard Tyrell tried to kill me a few years ago, Richard said. First time I ever had to shoot someone, and he had the nerve to claim he did nothing wrong when he was charging at me with a knife. We can reminisce about old times later, their boss said. For now, we need to find a lead in this case. Whoever's responsible, they're covering their tracks well. Too well. No video of the murder. All the cameras in the area deactivated shortly after Dontrell left the smoke shop and came back on an hour later. Varun's stumped. Can't figure out who hacked them or how. Right now, the only lead we have is the fact that these murders seem to happen at the same time that this secret Hitler group distributes their propaganda, and someone out there is able to hack in and disable all the cameras before they happen. That's enough to assume the murders and the propaganda are connected. William said, "Most of the propaganda has been very low-tech, though. Why not hack people's phones and computers?" "Good question, and I don't know," their boss replied. Richard said, "If they're distributing this stuff by hand, they likely have a street team doing it." "Exactly," their boss replied, "and that's why I called the three of you specifically to this meeting." The three detectives gave him curious looks. "If we can't find the hackers responsible, and the murderer is covering his tracks, the weak spot in this operation is most likely the people distributing the propaganda. Putting up posters and tossing flyers in people's driveways takes manpower. It's likely they have a local crew helping them, and we need to find out who they are." The detectives looked at each other for a moment, then back at their boss. Sandra asked, "How do you expect us to do that?" Their boss replied, "If these people are spreading anti-Jewish messages and killing minorities, there's a good chance they're part of some kind of far-right hate group. The street team almost definitely is. You three are white, so you'll be able to fit in well enough to investigate them." William looked annoyed. Sandra looked confused, and Richard looked amused. "What are you going to do? Put us on a deep cover assignment infiltrating the Aryan Nation gang?" "No," their boss replied. "The far right has expanded into a lot of new groups over the past decade. Proud Boys, Patriot Front, groups like that are popping up all over and bringing new people into their movement. Some of those groups have done their own flyer campaigns like the one last night." William asked, "So you want us to infiltrate one of those groups?" "Isn't Proud Boys a men's club?" Sandra asked. "I don't think I've seen any women in the pictures of Patriot Front protests either. How am I supposed to infiltrate a men's club?" "Those two are men's clubs, yes. William, you're going to infiltrate Patriot Front. Seems they get together every Saturday to work out and do martial arts. You should be able to handle it. Richard, you'll be infiltrating Proud Boys. They mostly get together on the weekends to barbecue and drink beer, but who knows what else they get up to. There are rumors that they're into drugs, but don't be too quick to try to bust them for that. We need to get to the bottom of this case, so if you see any drug activity, just gather evidence and sit on it until we have a lead on this case. Maybe we can use that to pressure someone to squeal and tell us about the murders. Sandra, turns out there's a local white supremacist church called the True Children of Zion. You're going to attend their church and get to know them. This will just be a weekend assignment for a few weeks to see what you can uncover. No need for deep cover, but I've got fake IDs for each of you with a different last name just so they don't figure out you're cops." He passed out another folder to each of them. "There's enough info in there about the groups you're infiltrating that you should be able to fit in. Build their trust and maybe you'll get lucky and one of them will let something slip about this secret Hitler group." Chapter 1. Barbara had recently dyed her blue hair back to its original brown. She stopped wearing most of her usual piercings a few weeks ago after she was talked into helping infiltrate the far right by local left-wing activists. Her nose piercing had partially closed up and now resembled a large pore rather than a piercing, while her lip piercings had almost completely healed. With makeup on, she thought it looked like she'd never been pierced at all. Her nipple piercings had healed up as well, which disappointed her more than the loss of her nose and lip piercings, but she planned on getting them redone once the job was done. She'd considered getting laser removal of the Harry Potter tattoo on her upper arm since she was planning on getting it covered eventually anyway, but she decided that it would be easier to simply dress in more conservative clothing that hid her tattoos. Even though she wasn't sure yet how she'd be expected to infiltrate the far right, she wanted to look the part when she showed up to the planning meeting, so she wore a long-sleeved gray sweater that wasn't even form-fitting with an ankle-length khaki skirt. She wondered if she'd gone overboard by letting her nipple piercings close up, but as she looked herself over in the mirror, she thought to herself that she'd fit right in if she were in The Handmaid's Tale or some similar far right-wing fantasy world. The planning meeting was taking place in the meeting room of a local vegetarian restaurant that regularly hosted left-wing activist groups. Barbara wasn't a vegetarian, and neither were most of the left-wing activists who regularly used the space, but she appreciated their dedication to radical equality even though she herself wasn't dedicated enough to stop eating animals. As she walked in, she was relieved to see she wasn't the only woman there, though she felt a pang of regret over the fact that the group was entirely white. She was a bit surprised to see Kenzie and Teresa, a lesbian couple she had met at a Bernie Sanders event a few years ago. Kenzie considered herself a Wiccan priestess, and as usual was wearing one of her crystal pendants over a t-shirt with a picture of what Barbara assumed was some goddess or other. Her girlfriend was the more surprising of the two, a 6.5-foot tall former volleyball player who had grown her usual blonde pixie cut out a few inches. The two of them sat together between Charles, a lanky guitarist who seemed to be in a different local punk band every time she ran into him, and Paul, a chubby and scruffy anarchist whose tendency to mansplain political issues sometimes got on Barbara's nerves, but she knew he meant well and tried to overlook his behavior. There were two other young white men sitting on the other side of Charles who Barbara had never met, and another middle-aged white man with dark curly hair named Ezra at the front of the room, trying to get his laptop to work with the projector. Barbara hesitated for a moment, not really wanting to sit next to Paul, but decided to greet her acquaintances before picking out her seat. "Hey, good to see you all again," she said as she walked up to them. "Barbara, is that really you?" Kenzie's eyes were wide with surprise. "I don't think I've ever seen you with a normal hair color before," Paul said, which made Barbara struggle to contain her eye roll. "Yeah, you usually look as punk as I usually do. Guess we both had to go normie for this," Charles joked, having cut off his mohawk and taken his own piercings out, though he still had a couple of visible tattoos on his forearms, and the holes where his ears and lip had been pierced were still slightly visible. "Ugh, don't remind me. I look so boring. Feels like I should be in The Handmaid's Tale," Barbara replied. "Think you can hold your tongue long enough to trick a bunch of Nazi scum?" Charles replied, "The struggle will be real." "I think I can calm my tits," Kenzie said, making Teresa laugh, "as long as I remind myself what we're doing this for." "I can fake being a libertarian well enough, even though they're completely lacking in any sense of morality or empathy," Paul said. "I think that's why so many of them have been drawn to the far right over the last decade." He seemed ready to expand on that point, so Barbara decided to cut him off before he could elaborate. "What about you, Teresa?" Teresa shrugged. "Might as well use my blonde hair and blue eyes for a good cause." Barbara was about to come up with something witty to say when she was surprised by fingers tickling her from behind. She spun around, and her momentary shock and annoyance were replaced by pleasant surprise. "Carol!" She threw her arms around her old friend, a theater geek who'd made high school much more entertaining for her. "Barbie!" Carol hugged her back. "I had no idea you would be here." They hugged tightly for a few seconds, then released each other, but Carol kept her hands on Barbara's arms as she looked her over. "This look takes me back. I haven't seen that hair color on you since we were teens." Barbara nodded sheepishly. "I know, right? Looks like you dressed the part too. We're practically twins." She looked down at Carol's form-fitting sweater and long skirt, though Carol's sweater was red rather than gray, and their skirts were slightly different shades of brown. "Let's sit together!" Carol led Barbara willingly to two open seats on the other side of the two men she hadn't met yet. Just as they got settled down, Barbara looked up as two more men entered the room, and had to try to suppress a look of shock as she noticed that one of them was DeAndre, a black man who had hit on her at a Black Lives Matter rally a few years ago. She blinked a few times, mostly in surprise, as she wasn't sure how he was expected to infiltrate the white supremacist extremist groups she thought they were here to infiltrate, though she'd also found some of his antics and views on women to be off-putting. The other man, Ronald, was a communist friend of hers who had recruited her for this mission and put her in touch with Ezra. "I think that's everyone I was expecting, unless any of you invited friends and nobody told me," Ezra said as Ronald and DeAndre sat down on the other side of Carol from Barbara. "Not all of you have met me in person yet, so for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ezra Jacobs, and I'm a recovering far-right-wing extremist." Ezra's voice was a bit nasally, and he reminded Barbara of a few sitcom characters who were often the butt of other people's jokes, making Barbara wonder if he'd left the far right due to bullying at the hands of other extremists. "I'm sure you've all seen the news reports about the serial killer targeting minorities," Ezra continued as he put a news article about the killings up on the projector. "And most of you have seen the propaganda by a group calling themselves Secret Hitler, unfairly targeting Jews and spreading the wildest conspiracy theories about them." The projector changed to a picture of a flyer accusing Jews of being responsible for an increase in the number of transgender and gay people in society. Some of you have undoubtedly noticed that the secret Hitler hate campaigns all seem to happen at the same time as the serial murders. He displayed a list of dates of the killings and secret Hitler propaganda campaigns, which matched perfectly. I don't believe this is a coincidence, but I do believe that Secret Hitler is a bigger organization than just the person or people committing the killings. Unfortunately, we have no idea who this Secret Hitler hate group is. Neither do the police, and from what my sources tell me, they've got no leads on who the murderer is, and have no interest in investigating the vile hate speech these people are spewing at Jews and other minorities to increase violence against marginalized people. That's why I've asked you all to come here and help the community take matters into our own hands. Most of you are white, and DeAndre is male, which means we all have some forms of privilege, even though many of you are also part of marginalized communities. That's why I'm asking you to use however much privilege you have for a good cause, to infiltrate local far right-wing hate groups and see if any of them know anything about this secret Hitler group that we can use to expose them. I won't lie to you, this could become dangerous. Unfortunately, some of the members of the local hate community would recognize my face from when I was a part of their community years ago, before I had a change of heart and saw the error of my ways. When that happened, I received death threats. I had to move to a new home, and I thought about moving to a new city, but I didn't want to let them scare me away and win, so I stayed and vowed to do my part to resist them. I've helped the local Antifa chapter expose and shame some of the hateful bigots I once made the mistake of calling my friends. He switched the image to a set of pictures and names of members of the local Proud Boys. But I don't want any of you to face the same danger I did. Even though you'll be infiltrating the local hate groups, I don't want you to immediately dox and expose every member you can. Even though it's important to expose these hateful bigots, it's more important that we get to the bottom of this secret Hitler group, stop their murder spree, and prevent them from spreading their hate speech once and for all. Ezra paused and looked at each of the 10 people sitting in a row in front of him. Each of you will be putting yourself at risk by infiltrating these groups. I tried to recruit people who aren't widely known, and while some of you are known to other members of our community, I don't think any of you is famous enough to be known to the local far right. If some of them do recognize you and accuse you of being a far leftist or one of the other ridiculous labels they like to use to discredit good, honest people, just tell them your views have changed. In a little bit, I'll be going over some of the local hate groups you're going to be infiltrating, but first, why don't we all introduce ourselves? I'm Ezra Jacobs, and I used to be in the Proud Boys, a far-right hate group full of misogynistic, homophobic, and racist bigots. Today I work with Hope Not Hate, trying to reform other misguided people like I used to be. Today I have friends who are gay, black, Hispanic, Jewish, Asian, and all sorts of other things, and I'm much happier for it, which is why I want to expose these vile racists and bigots before they can hurt anyone else. Let's go down the line. Why don't you tell us your name and a little bit about what brings you here? Ezra motioned to Paul. I'm Paul Adams. I'm an anarcho-communist, so I'm as far from a Nazi as it gets. Paul looked a bit nervous for a second, but sounded more smug as he went on. I've been active with Antifa and communist political causes for some time, but usually in the background or wearing a mask, so hopefully none of them will know who I am. Teresa hesitated for a moment, even as Ezra motioned to her. Hi, I'm Teresa Swell. I'm a Democrat, I guess, and bisexual, so they probably hate me for that. I'm not that active politically, so they probably won't recognize me unless they were really into college volleyball a few years ago. She laughed nervously and shrugged. I'm Kenzie Logos. I'm Teresa's girlfriend. I'm also not super active politically, but I have been to some Bernie Sanders rallies. I'm a Wiccan priestess, and I think it's important to create a more tolerant world where everyone can be themselves, so I'd like to do my part to oppose the hate and negativity these people are spreading in my city. I'm Charles Brand. I've been going to Antifa protests across the country for years, but I've always worn a mask. Some of them might recognize me as the bassist for the Flaming Lips, or from one of my other bands, but they probably don't have good enough taste in music to know me. Some of them chuckled a bit, and Barbara noted that he had indeed changed bands since she'd last seen him. The next man looked like he was in his mid-20s, of average height and build, with short red hair and a mustache, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. Hi, I'm Joseph Myers. I was a Bernie supporter, and I've been listening to Charlie's bands for a while, so when he asked me to help, I was happy to. I've never been a big enough political activist for anyone to know me for that, but I do support the progressive cause. The man sitting next to Barbara looked to be in his 40s and was starting to go bald. He wore a navy blue polo and khakis and looked like a simple office drone. I'm Gary Grimm, and I'm gay, and I've also been active with Antifa, but like Charles, I've always worn a mask. Unless there are some self-hating gay guys in their hate groups, they probably won't recognize me. I'm Barbara Sheridan. Barbara rarely had trouble talking about herself. I'm also a progressive, and I voted for Bernie and attended a few Black Lives Matter rallies, but I was never the leader of anything. I usually have more colorful hair and piercings, so they probably wouldn't recognize me even if they've seen me before. I'm Carol Conti, and I'm a communist, Carol said with confidence and a smile. I hate fascists with all my heart and soul, but I'm an actress, so I'm looking forward to putting my acting skills to use to expose the enemies of equality and progress. Ronald Drake. I'm also a communist. Ronald had gotten his usual few inches of dark brown hair cut short. He was just over 6 foot tall and a bit chubby, but hid it under his loose t-shirt. I'm pretty active online, but honestly I haven't done enough in the real world, and I want to change that. I'm DeAndre, and I was at the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020. I don't know how I'm supposed to fit in with a bunch of racist white supremacists, but if I can help stop them, I want to try. It may surprise you, but there are non-white members of the Proud Boys, Ezra said. He looked around on his computer for a bit before putting up a picture of a dark-skinned man in a black polo shirt with yellow stripes on the collar and a yellow laurel on the chest. This is Enrique Tarrio, the leader of the Proud Boys. Even though their club is full of racist Nazi sympathizers, they like to keep a few non-white members around, and even show them off publicly, so they can pretend they're not really racist and get away with their bigotry. But don't be fooled. The local Proud Boys are definitely racist bigots, despite their acceptance of non-white members. Damn, that's like that Chappelle skit with that black KKK member, DeAndre exclaimed. Barbara chuckled quietly, and a few other people laughed too. Maybe I can pull this off. I hope so, Ezra replied. They may be hateful, but they're not very bright. As long as you play along with their bigotry, you should have no problem fitting in. He paused for a moment as he looked over each of the 10 people sitting in a row before him. The Proud Boys are just one of 4 local groups I'd like you to infiltrate and gather information on. Many of you have heard of Patriot Front. They're even more racist than the Proud Boys. The Proud Boys are basically just the more extreme end of Trump supporters, but Patriot Front members openly support Hitler and think of themselves as Nazis. They don't accept black, gay, or Jewish members like Proud Boys, only straight white men. Ezra put up a picture of masked white men in polo shirts, khaki pants, and masks carrying American flags. Patriot Front is the most dangerous of these organizations by far. They're training for war. In fact, those of you who are going to spy on them will start by going to what they call an active club, where they get racist white men together to practice fighting. There's a possibility that the killer will be at this active club, training to kill. Even if the serial killer isn't there, it will still be good for you to see what your enemies are doing. They want a civil war, and they're prepping for it. Because of that, I've chosen 3 fit white men from this group to infiltrate Patriot Front. Ronald, Joseph, Charles, do you think you can handle combat training with Nazis? Everyone looked towards the 3 of them, who looked at each other. I think so, Ronald answered first, despite being somewhat overweight and not looking that fit to Barbara. I need to work out more anyway, especially if we're going to have to fight Nazis in the street again someday. There are some Nazbols in one of my Discord servers that I argue with sometimes, so I think I understand their views well enough to fake being one. After a short pause, Teresa asked, What's a Nazbol? National Bolshevik, Ronald answered. Kind of a combination of a Nazi and a communist. I think it's ridiculous since the whole point of communism is radical equality, and that's the opposite of Nazism. But I can pretend to be one, I guess. Ezra replied, Good. Yeah, I've been working out more the last few years, too, Charles said. I've seen too many of our people get punched out by Nazis. We've always had the numbers to win, but some of the bigots we fought with were strong, and I don't want to see any more innocent people on our side get hurt if I can help it." He punched his hand to emphasize the point. "Time to see if I can keep up with these assholes." Joseph shrugged. "I'll try. We'll see how it goes. Guess I'll have to start listening to Nick Fuentes and figure out how to fake being a groiper." Teresa looked confused again. "What's, She trailed off, unable to repeat the word. "Groipers are followers of Nick Fuentes," Ezra explained. "He used to be a big Trump supporter and told people to storm the Capitol on J6. Last I heard, he's starting to split from Trump because Trump doesn't hate Jews enough for him." Joseph added, "Most of his fans are immature idiots. Shouldn't be too hard to fake that, but I don't know if that will be serious enough for these guys." Ezra told him, "As long as you're believable, I think they'll accept you. If they pressure you to become more hardcore, just play along." Charles added, "All right, and since we're friends, we can tell them we decided to join together. That way it won't be so suspicious having us all join at once." "Good, that will make it easier," Ezra confirmed. He pulled up the X profile of the local active club. "Let's have one of you contact this account. Tell them you want to bring a couple friends to join their group. When you contact them, tell them your friends are based. For those of you who haven't interacted with the far right much online, based is a word that basically means bigoted and hateful. If you say something is based, it means it's something a Nazi would like. I'll go over some terms to use and beliefs you should claim to have at the end, like accusing Jews of stealing all your money through the Federal Reserve, and other crazy conspiracy theories to make it easier to fit in. First, let's move on to the next group, Proud Boys. Gary, DeAndre, and Paul, I'd like you to infiltrate Proud Boys. Gary, you don't have to tell them that you're gay. They may give you shit about it if you do, but being gay won't prevent you from joining like it would with Patriot Front. Make sure to criticize trans people twice as hard and talk about how they're ruining things for gay people if they do find out you're gay." "Okay, I think I can handle that," Gary said. "So what do these guys do? Are they training for combat too?" "Honestly, they're more likely to get into a bar fight than do serious combat training," Ezra answered as he pulled up the X profile of a local man named Zach Martin, whose profile picture showed him wearing a black hat with the letters PB in yellow on it. "You'll have to contact this guy to join. He was the leader of the local Proud Boys chapter last I knew. If it's anything like when I was in 5 years ago, they'll probably just get together to grill meat, drink beer, maybe smoke some weed. They used to go to political protests more often, but I haven't seen them do anything like that in a few years." Paul asked, "What made you join them in the first place?" "At the time, I was a Trump supporter and a fan of a guy named Gavin McInnes. He was a podcaster and streamer for a while, and he started Proud Boys supposedly as a drinking club for right-wing dads. It sounded cool at the time, but I had no idea what it would turn out to be like. When I joined, there were still some normal people in the club, but a bunch of far right-wing conspiracy nuts joined and drove all the normal people away. After Trump lost in 2020, they went completely nuts, spouting ridiculous conspiracy theories about Jews poisoning the public with vaccines and rigging the election. I realized that what I thought were just edgy jokes were actually real beliefs. They seriously think all Jews are part of some big global conspiracy to take over the world." Ezra paused as everyone laughed before continuing. "And they also think blacks are all violent rapists and murderers, and women are all manipulative gold diggers and all that. And sure, there are some bad apples in every group, but white men are far from perfect too. After seeing all the hate and craziness, I had to rethink a lot of what I believed. Now I'm a progressive Democrat, and I'm ashamed I ever voted for Trump." "We forgive you," Carol told him. "We're not going to hate you forever for your mistakes like those evil assholes, now that you've learned from them and are trying to make things right." "Thank you." Ezra looked humbled, but some deep instinct in Barbara told her that the look was fake, and he wasn't as repentant as he claimed. She tried to shrug it off. After all, he was trying to expose even worse people than the group he used to belong to. "I know how to bitch about women, so I'll fit right in with them," DeAndre said. Some of the men chuckled, but Barbara shot him a concerned look, and the other women in the room looked slightly uncomfortable. "I'm sure that'll help you fit in," Ezra told him.
It's one of their favorite pastimes. Just make sure you don't forget that women are all unique individuals, and even if you've had bad experiences with some women, you should never judge them as a group, just like you should never judge blacks or Jews or gays or anyone else as a group, just because you have a problem with a few individuals in the group.
"Oh yeah, I know," DeAndre replied, though his reply didn't sound entirely sincere to Barbara. Things were starting to get a little bit uncomfortable for her, but she had a feeling she'd have to get used to that to endure the next few weeks.
"It's important that we meet up again regularly as you're dealing with these people," Ezra continued. "Sometimes when people go undercover like this, part of them gets used to being part of the group they're infiltrating. You'll need to continue interacting with other progressives so you remember that you're a good person, and you don't lose yourself in the role of a bigot."
The room was quiet for a moment, and Barbara considered the situation. So far, both the groups that had been discussed were men's groups, and all the men had been given their assignments. Barbara asked, what about us? If these are all men's groups, how are the women supposed to get involved? Do they have a Proud Girls Club, too?"
"Oh no, they're much too misogynistic to give women any special clubs like that," Ezra said. "On the far right, they think women aren't supposed to be too involved in politics, at least not directly. But there is a way for you to get involved. There are 2 racist, white-only religious groups that have a presence in the city. One is called the True Children of Zion, a fake Christian church. They claim that the Israelites of the Old Testament became the people of Europe, and that today's Jews are descended from Esau, some boogeyman from their crazy interpretation of the Bible. It's a ridiculous belief system, but they believe salvation is only for white people. I don't know how they got that idea."
Ezra shrugged.
"But Carol and Barbara, I'd like the 2 of you to attend their services for a few weeks and see what you can find out. Their church is pretty small. There probably aren't more than a couple dozen people who attend services there, but there's a chance some of the secret Hitler people go to church there."
Barbara groaned. "I hate church." Despite that, the part of her that was fascinated with serial killers was still determined to take part. "But maybe the killer is some kind of religious fanatic. I'll try my best to find out what's going on there. Or at least find out enough about the people who go there to get them fired from their jobs when this is over." "Maybe they have a choir? Or need a choir," Carol said. "Ugh, hopefully we can find some way to make this fun and not just creepy and depressing. But yeah, I went to church growing up, and they'll probably underestimate us because we're women. I'm sure we can blend in, and if things go wrong, we can just play dumb until we can get out of there."
"Good," Ezra replied. "The other organization is called the Asatru Folk Assembly. They don't have an actual church building like the True Children of Zion, at least not here in town. They have a few in other states."
He pulled up the website for one of them and went to a list of their leaders, which showed a woman named Robin White listed as something called a folk builder.
"I don't know how many people they have locally, but one of their church leaders is local, and their calendar shows an event next Sunday. Kenzie, Teresa, I'd like you to contact her and see if you can talk her into letting you attend their local events."
"Wait, they let women be leaders?" Teresa asked.
"Apparently," Ezra replied. "I'll be honest, I don't actually know much about them. Apparently Asatru is some kind of Viking pagan faith. I don't know if they're as sexist as the other church, but they're definitely racist and only let white people join."
"I think I've heard of them," Kenzie said. "One of my Wiccan friends asked me to sign a petition condemning some racist pagan group a few years ago. Hopefully they don't find out about that."
"Hopefully it won't be an issue," Ezra said. "Since you're Wiccan, I figured you'd be more comfortable infiltrating their group than a Christian church."
"Yeah, definitely, but it's still a bit scary," Kenzie replied. "At least I'll have my big strong girlfriend to protect me." She leaned against Teresa's arm and Teresa smiled at her. "You got the cool racist hate church where women can be leaders," Barbara said sarcastically, "while we're stuck with the crazier people who think women should be seen and not heard. I'm jealous." "Yeah, that's shitty," Teresa replied. "Sorry there are people like that, but I don't know how much better this group will actually turn out to be." "It's fine," Barbara said. "The more sexist they are, the more determined I will be to find a way to bring them down." "That's my girl!" Carol rubbed Barbara's arm excitedly with her fingertips. "We're going to be super secret spies and uncover all their dirty secrets together."
"All right, good," Ezra said, as the group smiled at their enthusiasm.
Ezra went on to explain some of the beliefs of each group at a basic level, with a list of slang words and phrases he had them practice, and a list of a few conspiratorial and racist things they could talk about, such as anti-Jewish conspiracy theories and racial crime stats, with the typical disclaimers about why they shouldn't actually believe each of those things. Barbara felt as if she'd taken on a heavy burden, like Frodo carrying the ring. She didn't like feeling weighted down that way, and was relieved when Ezra wrapped up his lesson on how to pretend to be far right, and it came time for the rest of the group to contact the leaders of their respective hate groups to try to work their way in. Since Carol and Barbara simply had to show up at the church on Sunday morning, they were able to leave the meeting early. The two of them discussed what they were in for as they walked to their cars. "I'm glad I have a friend to do this with," Barbara told her. "I was kind of nervous about all this, especially after hearing about how misogynistic the first two groups are." "I know! It's sick!" Carol replied in a tone that was performatively exaggerated. "If they really do expect women to be seen and not heard, at least we won't have to talk to them much. But that will make it harder to spy on them." "Maybe some of the women there will be willing to talk to us," Barbara suggested. "I'm sure some of them feel oppressed. If we can win their trust, hopefully they'll spill all the dirt on the awful men in their church, and we can help them find a way out safely." "I didn't even think of that! That's a good idea!" "Just don't let any of the men get you alone," Barbara added. "The way they think about women, I'm sure their holier-than-thou attitude is just an act." "Good thing there are two of us," Carol replied, and offered Barbara a hug goodbye, which she gratefully accepted. "It's really good to see you again." They released each other a half a minute later, but Carol left her hand on Barbara's shoulder for a moment. "Let's meet for coffee that morning, before the service. Get ourselves into character and all that." "I'd love that," Barbara replied. "See you then."